Thank you for joining us. This is Left Bank Books presents Washington University alum, writer, professor, and sex educator Merissa Nathan Gerson, who will discuss her heartrending, relatable account, Forget Prayers, Bring Cake, A Single Woman's Guide to Grieving. Gerson will be in conversation with St. Louis professor and author of Famished, Rebecca Lester. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. Left Bank Books would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Marissa and Rebecca, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the world. You can now come into our store to find this wonderful book on display. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope you enjoy this event, and we hope you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or all of your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating and allows us to keep this event series going. Thank you for your support. We need your support. I am Amber Norris, Assistant Manager and Marketing and Publicities Manager for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from the audience toward the end of the event, so please type your questions as a comment. Be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified of all of our fantastic virtual events. Our fall schedule is packed with fantastic events for readers of all ages. So just a moment to tell you about Forget Prayers, Bring Cake, A Single Woman's Guide to Grieving. Though at times it may seem impossible, we can heal with help from our friends and community if we know how to ask. This heartrending, relatable account of one woman's reckoning with loss is a guide to the world of self-recovery, self-love, and the skills necessary to meeting one's own needs in these times of pain, especially when that pain is suffered alone. Grief is all around us. In the world of today, it has become common and layered, no longer only an occasional weight. A book needed now more than ever. Forget Prayers, Bring Cake is for people of all ages and orientations dealing with grief of any sort, professional, personal, romantic, familial, or even the sadness of the modern day. This book provides actions to boost self-care and self-worth. It shows when and how to ask for love and attention and how to provide it for others. It shows that it is okay to define your needs and ask others to share theirs. In a moment in which community, affection, and generosity are needed more than ever, this book is an indispensable roadmap. This book will be a guiding light to a healthier mental state amid these troubled times. As Publisher Weekly says, Gerson debuts with an illuminating memoir come guide to dealing with grief as a single woman. Gerson's willingness to explore the depth and breadth of personal loss will help those grieving know they are not alone. A little bit about our speakers tonight. Merissa Nathan Gerson is author of the forthcoming Forget Prayers, Bring Cake, A Single Woman's Guide to Grieving. She is a New Orleans-based writer, professor, and sex educator. Her written work has appeared in The Atlantic, The New York Times, Playboy, and Tablet, among others. And she was the inherited trauma consultant for Amazon's Emmy Award-winning television show, Transparent. Marissa is a graduate of Washington University, class of 2004, where she majored in American Culture Studies and Women and Gender Studies. Rebecca Lester, our conversation partner tonight, was her professor in an amazing course on gender, culture, and madness. Rebecca J. Lester is professor of anthropology at Washington University in St. Louis and a licensed clinical social worker. She is the author of numerous academic articles and the award-winning book, Jesus in Our Wombs. And now, I would like to welcome our guests for the evening, Merissa Nathan Gerson and Rebecca Lester for Left Bank Books. If everyone would please applaud wherever you are to give them a hearty welcome.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was wonderful. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Marissa. How are you?
I'm honored. I feel like a very cool kid talking to her professor now, like 20 years later, though.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing that we met so many years ago now. And of course, you're a student who stood out at the time. And I'm so glad that we've kept in touch all these years. And it's just amazing to be here with you to talk about your incredible book.
Well, I'm so pleased to be with you. Thank you.
Before we get started, actually, I wanted to invite you if you wanted to maybe share some of the book with us so people can get a flavor of the
Sure.
writing and the heart and soul that is in this book.
I would love that. Here's just a quick glimpse of the slow cover that's so wonderful that Katie Smith, an illustrator in the UK, made. And I'll just show you the interior as well. It's so beautiful. So I'm going to read a quick excerpt from chapter 8. It's called Hello, Is This Over Yet? To designate a hell is not, of course, to tell us anything about how to extract people from that hell, how to moderate hell's flames. Susan Sontag, regarding the pain of others. Come February, just 2 months after my father died, I was gearing up for my first Mardi Gras. I had a new job. I had an old wedding dress my father bought me for $25 as a joke years earlier when a bridal shop went out of business. I spent my evenings after work painting it, deconstructing it, gluing flowers and stitching beads to make this my Mardi Gras costume. Leading up to Fat Tuesday, I wrestled with contradicting beliefs within myself. My religion told me to pause the party, to stop for this time of Ave Lut, of mourning, to avoid dancing, joy, and the like. 1 year. This time allowance belongs to the stricter realm of Jewish tradition. 1 year away from the regular joys of the world when a parent dies. And then you return. I remember my uncle telling me how some of his patients needed a year of sleep to recover from certain things. I remember a Jewish agricultural concept of the Shemitah year, after 6 years of growth, taking a 7th year to leave the field arid, to leave the field quiet, to let it find its way to regeneration. The idea of a year off, of a year to pause, of a year for mourning in which I would participate wholly different in life was hard for me to submit to. On a Friday, I joined my crew of Dystopian Paradise, for a pre-Mardi Gras parade called La Boheme, wearing a velour onesie, sparkly leggings, a decked-out hot pink blazer, and hiking boots. When we began to ride through the crowds for 2 miles, essentially a slow, boisterous walk, dance, bike ride, float, moving through roaring throngs of people from the Bywater through the Marigny to the French Quarter, I was both happy and bewildered, both excited and exhausted. I felt like a minor celebrity dance star and at once aware of the haunted, unlit corners of New Orleans streets. I said I was happy. My body was flailing in celebration. But inside, I had the sense that my knowledge of death was shadowing my walk through the city. I was half there, pushing into joy with all my might, while another part of me wholly resisted. I felt guilty for parading, guilty for dancing, guilty for getting up and going when I was taught otherwise. I wasn't afraid of God per se, but I was worried about consequences. Perhaps for me, as someone new to New Orleans, drinking and frolicking was more dangerous when one leg was so close to the grave. I felt a pop in my left knee. I kept on keeping on. And then, as we got about 2 feet away from the French Quarter, I felt this burst of excited energy in my legs, leapt into the air, and I landed in some strange squat of a dance move, screamed, and fell into the onlooking crowd. Lovely. I had partially torn my ACL and flipped my meniscus, causing a massive bucket tear. This was not my time to dance. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose, right? A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. Okay, and of course, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. I rode the St. Anne's Mardi Gras Day parade in my deconstructed wedding dress on a bike taxi, leg in an ankle-to-thigh brace, crutches hanging over the edge. And my body took me to a sofa for the months to come. Whether I liked it or not, this was going to have to be my time to mourn. Stop there for now.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I mean, I've read the words, but to hear you read them is a whole different experience. And I have goosebumps, and just thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for listening.
And, it brings to mind what the experience of writing this book might have been like for you, kind of revisiting all of these feelings and memories of this really difficult time.
Yeah. Well, the weird part of writing this book is, and I'm only now that it's coming out realizing what I did. I wrote it alone in a house during a pandemic. So I was pretty isolated, and I was still teaching at Tulane, but I didn't, I was home a lot by myself. And it gave an order to time we were all sort of thrust into such profound disorder that to try to take the matrix of the impossible realm of grief and try to sort of piece it together into some semblance of order, in some ways was grounding. I mean, it was both completely unmooring. Like I don't recommend to anyone to write a book about death and grief while mourning the first year of their parents' death in a pandemic. But I do think it did something good for me to start to take grief will disorganize anyone. And anyone who's grieving knows it sort of blows the head off anything normal in your sort of thinking. It makes everything you thought you knew to be true is questioned, like for a period. It just throws you into disorder. So in some ways it was a privilege to be in that disorder with the task of ordering this information for whoever can access it.
Right. I was really struck in reading the book too, that there seem to be so relatively few resources for us as a society, as a culture, for navigating these kinds of experiences, for, as pan-human as something like loss is. It's surprising a bit that in America, we don't talk about it as much, and we don't have very elaborated resources for supporting people through an experience like this.
Yeah.
Wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
There are a remarkably large amount of books about grief. It's just a question of what angle someone wants to enter the topic. So I think for some people, I have a lot of friends who lost mothers, and there are books that are specific about that. But for what I was going through, I did not find what I needed. And so I did write the book that I wanted for myself. That was, it intentionally makes it so that if you're in a place where you can't read, like I think a lot of people when they're traumatized can't read an entire book, that you can just look at the table of contents and be like, okay, I need this resource, go. And I need that. And so there's pages that are just information juxtaposed against memoir. But I think a lot when you go through something, you suddenly see everything differently. And I remember when I got like really hurt for the first time, I had a drunk driver hit my car in like 2006. And I was really banged up, and it took me a really long time to recover. And I remember watching action films at the time and just being really angry when someone jumped off of a cliff, or they jumped off of a building, or someone threw a chair over their head, and then they were just going the next day, and there was no refractory period, and I think that even those things I'm realizing now I don't know if I like the word harmful, because it's just, we are what we are, we're in the culture we're in. But in terms of addressing death, like we really consume a lot of entertainment that pretends it doesn't happen, that pretends our bodies don't even hurt. And so, I watched shows like 6 Feet Under that were really groundbreaking, are actually really useful to really, oh, wow, that is what happens. That is what it looks like. Yeah. But I wanted to be able to read about, okay, why is my stomach hurting all the time? Like I didn't eat anything weird. I'm exercise. Like at a certain point I was like living my life again. Like, I wasn't just eating cake. I was like getting normal again. And I felt like crap, and I couldn't figure it out. And it was grief, and this was grief. And it's just so interesting that we don't always have the language for it,
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I think is really impressive about your book is the way that you explore those intersections between the emotional world and our bodies and our lived sense and existence, and how those things really impact one another. And that we have to approach it in this very holistic way that, is not always easy to articulate and to conceptualize, certainly when you're going through it.
Yeah.
And one thing we do in America, at least, is we tend to pathologize a lot of this stuff.
Yes.
And I know you mentioned that quite a bit in your book. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that angle.
Well, so for those that don't know, pathologize would mean that we sort of put a diagnosis on a lot of sort of basic human experiences. And I believe that like everyone should access care in whatever way they want. There's no like right or wrong, psychiatry or acupuncture, whatever you want to do for yourself, or, like your ayahuasca ceremony. Each person has their own thing. But I've been learning more about like different categories of grief and different ways that different communities, even different therapists, are or aren't versed in what grief is. And so it can be really scary that, like, I think we had talked earlier before the call about when I was 16, I lost a lot of people at once. Like my grandmother lived with us and she died, and so moved away, and this person had a really bad accident, and I couldn't stop crying. I just couldn't. And they ended up putting me on a lot of pills when I was 16, labeling it depression. And for some, that is the case. I'm not like debating whether, people's diagnoses and pills are real or not. But for me, what I experienced was that no one got that I was just grieving, and that we didn't have the tools to sit with that sadness and to sit with that much crying and to figure out what to do. Like, what do you do with a 16-year-old who's experiencing loss? And I don't have answers for all of that, but I wrote this book because I wanted people to be able to sort of like trot in and look around, like almost give a little virtual reality tour of, here's my grieving path, and this is what it looked like when I went down the like Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, and here's what I did. And it's different for everyone. I'm very much, I'm white, I'm Jewish, I'm not just any Jewish, I'm Holocaust survivor, family Jewish, and I have my own like package of weird stuff that someone else's package is different. But I was just hoping to say, like, okay, if you come on my trip, maybe you won't be so scared. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of your work is around religion and how religion permeates our bodies. And I've been thinking a lot about just the erasure of certain practices that we do need, and the erasure of like the spiritual person that might teach you what death is, or all of these different roles. And so I felt also excited to give my readers a little dose of all of the different trainings I've done over the years, and Buddhist training and Jewish training and like all kinds of woo-woo, this and that and the other, and to package it almost so that it can be digested, so you don't have to take the trip, but you can have some of the resources, because I think we're under-resourced. I think we need more resources as a people, and we're in a time that was so unprecedented that the more that I can give, I'm so honored to do so for whomever needs it.
I love in the book how you talk about ritual as this bigger than religion, bigger than spirituality, bigger than, or smaller, however you want to think about it, but other than that, it is a way that we create meaning in our lives, and that we can construct those rituals for ourselves, depending on what we need and what our capacities are and what we have around us. And ritual seems to have been a really important piece for you in your journey.
For sure. And the book is a single woman's guide. And one of the things that you're making me think of as we're talking is there was a process for me. And again, I'm Jewish, and so that's my journey. And everybody, I meet a lot of, everyone just bear with me. I chose this position, the Zoom shift. I did a lot of work to like depatriarchalize my Judaism. And it was like the biggest honor of my life to have that space and time to evaluate, okay, how did this religion sort of take all of the good out for me? And where did I miss the parts that could heal me? And how can this be useful? And I did a lot of work in my early 20s, like, well, why bother? Can't we just have all religions are one? And why would I need this religion? And what's the point in prayer? And why? And I came to all my own conclusions over time through sort of smashing everything I was taught to pieces. And I over the years have met a lot of ex-cult members and ex-evangelical like devotees who I really relate to, because in a lot of ways I did the work that they have to do as well, which is re-enter the world after you've sort of broken your paradigm completely and then piece it together on your own. Like, what do you do with Jesus if you broke Jesus? What do you do with prayer? What would I do if everything in my religion was telling me that it had to come from a man who was telling me how to behave? And if I didn't behave like the man said, I was sinful and I was bad. And if I gossiped, God wouldn't love me. And oddly, I got those messages. I don't know who gave them to me, but I got a lot of negative messages that when I realized that Judaism could be like a community participation thing, then I started to say, okay, well, who else does that? And I did a lot of wandering, and I'm only mentioning that because it gave me the agency to do it myself. And I didn't have that at the beginning. Like for me, where I grew up in Washington, D.C., if I were to do a prayer, I would stand and we would all read the same thing and chant in this very drone-like chant, and that was it. And my heart wouldn't open, as cheesy as that sounds, but I wasn't able to really access this part of me that when I found it through the other work I did and through like living in all these sort of hippie worlds I lived in over the years, that made me understand that as a woman, especially as a single woman, you know, that's not, I didn't follow any of the codes I was given, like none of them. I broke all the rules, and not, it might be in my nature, but I think some of it's just because of who I am. And like, what do you do when you're 25 and you don't have a husband? And then you're 30 and you don't have a husband. And okay, 30, it's fine, but then you're 35. And it's not that it's like so important. I mean, I don't even know if I want a husband or wife. At this point, I don't care that much. But I'm more saying that there's this narrative that's fed to me that tells me I need to do a certain way. And it applies to marriage, and it applies to how I felt the right to relate even to God and whatever God means to anybody. And ritual doesn't have to have anything to do with God as much as, to me, community. So something gave me the right to build community over the years.
Oh, that's amazing. So amazing that someday we'll sit down and I want to hear more about the various places that you've been and coming to all of these insights. You mentioned that this is, it is called the Single Woman's Guide to Grieving. And I was wondering why woman in particular, as opposed to single person's guide?
Yes, perfect. And first, just to sort of go backwards and then back to what you're saying now. I think it's just the reason that I'm dwelling on ritual and community and personal agency and practice is that the reason it's Single Woman's Guide is because I know so many women in their 30s who have come to feel like they've been vacuumed out, that there's nothing in them, that they're culturally void, that they're unpleasant, that they're unloved, that they don't deserve it. And then there's other pieces. They want something. They want a partner. They want kids. Like, these are the ones I'm thinking of. And they don't feel like they have any power. And there's something really destabilizing about wanting something you just don't feel like you can get, and reaching for it. And there's something about ritual that is so great. And I'll come back to the single woman question. It's so great because you do have power. Like, if I right now walked across the room and turned the light on that's off that I wish were on right now, it would literally transform that entire corner. And above that light are all the photos of my relatives and my ancestors, and it would light them all up. And that act is power. And if you can't make someone fall in love with you or like manifest some like divine being to be your like sperm partner forever, it's nice to be able to turn your corners. And so I said Single Woman's Guide because for me, I thought about doing, the single person, and wouldn't it be great if I could make this accessible to just anyone? Like, is a man going to buy this book? And by the way, every man should buy this book for like every woman you've ever met. And it's different. It's just, I don't mean that in like a gender binary way. Like, I'm very much someone who's aware of and loves and believes in the gender spectrum, and woman in this case is defined however we please. Like, it could be femme, it could be androgynous, it could be non-binary, it could be trans, like it could be anything under the sun and the moon and the stars. I don't care who's including themselves in the book. But for me, that gendered piece in terms of what culture puts on women, that's what I was referencing. And I wanted it to be really clear that, okay, I'm expected to take care of everybody else.
Right.
I'm expected to be pregnant. I'm expected to have like attracted a man to get on one knee and give me a fat diamond. And I don't have a diamond, and I don't have, this week I don't have that special. I don't have a man. I don't have children. But I have all these other things. And I think what I wanted to do was like, we spend a lot of time focusing on lack. And I wanted to take a flashlight for women in particular and be like, holy camole, even when you're grieving, even when everything sucks, even when like your partner left you for another woman and your mother died and your uncle like jumped off a cliff and like the car broke and your ankle is broken and your kid smashed his head open and the other kid broke his leg. And like, even then you can take that flashlight around your life and it's filled with gold. Like your life is yours. And I wanted to give them, like all the women I know on the planet that are suffering from this feeling of, oh my God, I'm single and I'm an anomaly. This culture is going to reject me. How am I going to have a party if I'm not married? Like, what am I going to do? And give them the tools to just enjoy their life. Like, I just wanted to affirm and love on women so that they get, I don't know, they just deserve it. And it is really hard to be somewhere where you're told that you're supposed to, it's very uncomfortable. Any woman that's ever tried to get pregnant and can't, any woman that's tried to get married and couldn't, any woman that's lost a child, any of these things under the sun, like your powerless experience is so profound. And I want to return power to the women. I want every element of ritual and practice. I want women to feel like they have power because that is what makes a society equal. And it's a little mythical that we have that if all the women hate themselves. So
yeah. Kind of on that note, I think it's so profound in the book that, women, we are socialized to be the caretakers, to be the consolers, to be the ones who are nurturing and like providing the comfort. And this book is a lot about, well, we need it too. There are times where we need all that stuff. And how do we go about getting it when we don't have those cultural scripts for how to ask for it?
Right. And I was thinking like while you were talking, I was like, I wonder if someone finds what I'm saying to be angry, like the angry feminist I'm not angry, but there is a lot to be angry about. There is a lot to be like, I think we often overlook it. We like, even just when I see, women are expected to be almost naked a lot of the time, like even our Lululemon pants or whatever, like there's a lot of exposure and a lot of not protection. And I think I just wanted to give everyone some more protection.
Mm-hmm.
Like the chapter on, making let me see if I can access something to read, but making your bed your spouse, it's basically just saying, it doesn't mean giving up on your life. And it doesn't mean giving up on the dream you might have to have a partner or children or whatever. It just means in the meantime, like really loving and it's not just self-care, it's beyond that. It isn't like class-based and it isn't race-based. And it's the permission to just be a little nicer in every way might make it easier to get through loss. That's it. Just a little nicer to you and how to get that and get those needs met. And it's sad. I did need to learn that. Like I don't know that every man, women, everyone under the sun sort of has to learn how to ask for what they need. And some families teach that more than others. But, I had to really learn to say that, I probably asked for what I needed early, but to really advocate for yourself. And I've lived alone for a long time. So I know that if I don't, nothing, sometimes people will find you, but sometimes you're just going to be on your own, so I think teaching these skills, I just believe in women. I believe in the power of women. And I do believe that we've been harmed a little bit and that there's some recovery and that this book is a little bit of a recovery. And then it also has nothing to do with women. Some of it is just a universal, like, what do we do with this horrifying thing called death that's like not gendered at all? And death will strip you of your sexuality. It'll strip you of your gendered nature. Like, it'll return you to some base thing. And, some of it is this feminist tirade. And a lot of it is, it's just a love song to human beings who don't know what to do with the amount of pain we're in. We are in so much pain. Like, all of us are just in so much pain. And I don't know what to do with it. No one really knows anymore because the amount, it's like it's getting poured hard lately, and it gets poured and people are scared. And I know that fear is contagious and pain is contagious at times. And I just wanted to give people tools to shine more light in the places that need it.
And I think this book has so much in it that extends beyond the issue of, a family member dying or a partner dying. That goes to that bigger question of loss and how we navigate that, or how we can learn to navigate that in new ways. That, are more empowering and fulfilling and take us in a different direction than maybe we thought we were going.
Yeah. I'm just sort of like, yes. I'm going to just read from page 44 in the book. It's a 2-page spread that's basically just on how to set up your grief support. So just to give you a little example of, some of it's memoir where I talk about, okay, I went home and I went back to my family and my bed broke and I realized I had to make the bed comfortable because I was going to be caretaking for a dying person and a lot of wounded family members. So this is just my suggestions to everybody for setting up your grief support.
Oh, Marissa, before you start, just be careful if you can that the book's not covering your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Get a little muffled. Yeah.
I got you. Okay. Setting up your grief support. Just like you might leave a list of care guidelines and emergency numbers for a babysitter, friend, or parent watching your child, make that list for you. So you remember how to care for yourself in an emergency. Things to do that are almost free. List and notify trusted friends. Identify trusting and available friends. Write their names down. List and notify trusted family, chosen or otherwise. Identify trusting and available family members. Write their names down. I really found that I kept lists everywhere, and I talk about it in the book, but when my head was dipping out and I was like, I don't know who to call, I literally had a giant piece of paper with the names of people who told me that I could call them so that I was ready for help when I needed it. Have an emergency contact in case you really panic. Pick one. Write the name and number down. Your contact can be a parent, friend, therapist, counselor, AA sponsor. Having the name on hand will make you feel so much less lonely in a crisis. Honor your body. When something is too much, as signaled by anxiety or nausea or pain or worry, walk away if you can. Stop reading, shut the screen, and respect your own boundaries so that you have reserves for what matters most. And forgive yourself for the times you can't. Jobs force many into ignoring feelings, and phone and screen obsession are typical in times of distress. Get touched. And this one is the hardest, I think, for a lot of single women. And I want to remind everyone that, single women aren't necessarily 19-year-olds. They're not necessarily 35-year-olds. Some of them are widows in their 70s. Some of them are widows in their 90s. Some of them are never been married ever. And the question is, when it's very painful, especially I think for those who actually have been married and then lose that touch, what do you do when you want to be touched? And I know so many women for whom the feeling and the desire to have someone physically touching them or pleasuring them, anything, and not being able to get that is almost as maddening as wanting a partner that you can't find. That it's this sense of powerlessness. So I'm trying again to give power back. So it just says have a lover. Many of you don't. That's fine. A nice friend, maybe not. A roommate, whomever in your life. Ask for a hug. Ask for a foot rub. Ask for them to brush your hair, whatever. Just ask for some eye contact and some non-sexual care to ground you. There's nothing wrong with getting yourself a giant stuffed animal. No one to touch you? Consider a 15-minute chair massage at a salon. Let a stranger rub your neck or feet. It can help. Sounds really ridiculous, but I'll tell you, at the supermarket when I lived in Colorado, there was a chair set up and you could pay $1 a minute. And when I was having any kind of emotional overwhelm or panic attack or anything, I would drive to the supermarket and I would pay $10 and someone it would calm me down immediately. And I don't think people should be ashamed to ask for things like that if they need it. And it doesn't have to cost a lot. It literally could cost $5 to $10 if you have it to spare, but it might make a difference. Bathe. I know for many mourners out there, bathing is horrifying because it sort of erases your connection to the person that died. Bathe if you can. Have a shower. Get some $5 eucalyptus or lavender oil and just toss it in there with the steam and bliss out. Wash that pain out of your hair. Got a bath? Get some Epsom salt, a candle. Just soak the rage right out of you. Really, just these little practices of tending to our own skin can make it less frightening to not have someone else. Cry. Yep. Hot forehead against the bathroom wall. Get it all out of you. eat protein, eat greens, not for your paleo keto fad diet, but for the sake of filling your body with nutrients. Doing so may help calm you. Also consider rice and beans, anything grounding. I could keep going on and on, but it says like drink tons of water, sleep, watch your own negative self-talk that might, and people know what that is. It's like when you're sitting in your room and you're like, I can't believe I didn't make my bed. I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve breakfast. I'm like an evil. Like we have these like forms of just being so mean in our heads. And it's usually a sign when you're sort of beating yourself up so hard that something's wrong. And so to start just sort of watching, sort of like we become our own meditation instructor almost, where you watch what comes through you. And we can't fix everything. Like I wish I could control that I'll never get sad again and that I'll never feel pain again. We can't do that, but we can control how much we're aware of like the thresholds we've reached. And, if we've gone too far where we're harming ourselves or others, we know we've gone too far. And last thing I'll just mention, there's identifying a grief navigator I wrote on that list. And I think that's one of the most important things of all. Grief is scary sometimes, and death is something that, because we don't talk about it, oftentimes you'll find like, or I don't know what you'll find, but I found that those who hadn't lost anyone yet, who were was close to them, couldn't help me in the same way, or not even help, but just be with me. And the pain I was in actually frightened the crap out of them. People are terrified of the pain of a mourner if they haven't experienced it before. And it was really, really just like deeply soothing to find someone who knew more about death than I did. So if I called, and some people who haven't dealt with their pain and know lots about death can still make you feel alienated at times, but a grief counselor, it could be a grandmother who is at peace and knows more than you do. It could just be, I had a friend here in New Orleans who also lost her father around just soon thereafter, and also her sister. And so being with her was amazing because she wasn't frightened of me and she wasn't frightened of my pain. And I think other people's fear can make a lot of us just shut down, especially women who feel like they're supposed to caretake. When someone seems scared, you're like, oh, I should shut up. You should be comfortable. Let me make you feel comfortable. And yes, make your friends comfortable, but don't sacrifice yourself. So I think finding someone who knows more than you do.
And that's what this book is, actually, is you are that person that people can then kind of have with them, and you can provide some of that. It's not quite the same as sitting with a friend and, getting hugs and all of that, but that is what you're doing.
Well, and I realized because I wrote it during a time where I really didn't get to be with my friends and family, in a lot of ways it is really truly a love song. Like my sort of lover, friend, everything was all of my readers, because I was in relationship with all of you who are reading the book, I hope, throughout this time where I was in so much isolation. So I was like, what can I give you? What can I give you? What can I offer? What can I do with the space I'm in to make it easier for the next woman, man, person? I mean, it's also a great book for if you are married and you have a spouse that's grieving. It's a great book for anyone to buy who needs to support their friend or their lover or their wife or their mother or their, like, I think it helps people understand the terrain of grief. And again, it's just my grief, but I did read a lot to write the book, and I think there's some tools in there. Yeah.
What did your family think about this project that you've undertaken? I assume they've all read it.
Yeah, they've all read it. I had a launch party Tuesday, and everyone's been super supportive and lovely to me. My dad hasn't said anything because he's dead, but I read so my mom and I have gotten very close this year. I wrote an article for Modern Love in the New York Times in January about that. She and I spent the early months of the pandemic alone together because I had major knee surgery after the accident that I read about. And it was the day before the world shut down for the pandemic. So my mom moved in with me. So we've gotten very close, and maybe like bizarrely close. I don't know if like when you're almost 40, you're supposed to spend this much time with your mom, but we are very close. And when I was with her earlier this summer, we were alone together again for about a month, maybe a couple of weeks. And I had this beautiful experience. I read her a chapter a day. Oh, wow. And it was really great. And also she's also a writer. She's a cookbook writer, and the reason it's great to have, it's both difficult and great to have other writers in your family is that tell you the truth. So when I think it's probably what made me a writer is that both of my parents would look at my papers growing up and just like slash and burn until I learned. But my mom, it was satisfying because she would tell me the truth. And the only thing, I think there was like one thing she didn't like, which is that in the beginning I talk about my great aunt Mildred, and I think I was named after her, and she got married and moved to Cuba when she was 50. But I got the story wrong, and I found out later that I got it wrong. And that my mom got really angry because she's like, "That's not true." Because I said that she was single and then moved to Cuba, but she moved to Cuba for marriage, just for the record. So, but mostly she was really happy. And then my brother hasn't read it yet. He's waiting for the audiobook, which is in the works. And my sister has been the most surprising, and they were all really scared at the beginning. Everyone was like, well, what are you going to say? And like, what are you going to reveal? And, we fought a lot. I think every family under the sun, except for like the really weirdest, I think the weirdest family we'll ever meet is the one that's only nice to each other. Yeah. Like that's just the weirdest family you'll ever meet. But I think almost every family has a lot of explosions and fights around the time of a death. And so I cut a lot of that out, but we were all kind of like, what's she gonna say? And like, what's she gonna tell about all of us? And my sister did something unprecedented. We went out for dinner, just the two of us this week on Monday night, which I don't think we've done in like, she has 2 3-year-olds, twins, so we don't do that. And she just told me that she had been to my father's grave. She read it to him, and that she's really grateful that I wrote the story down. And in a lot of ways, it was the most touching thing. And I never in a million years thought that she would be grateful for that. And, it's nice to have a record of who my father was. Like, I almost wish I had written more about him in the book, because it's nice. It's like, it's something we can revisit now, like little things in the book. Like I talk about, he had this weird alter ego, George, where he'd change his voice and his affect, and he was like a totally different person. And it was very highly developed, and things that no one would know and that we would forget over time. And so it's been a pleasure and a privilege to give my family a document of what happened. And I left a lot of things. I realize as I like go through time since I finished the book that there's a lot of things I chose to leave out without realizing it. Mm-hmm. And that's so weird to realize what you make it sacred. Yeah. That's like, it's yours. Because I get really raw in the book, and I expose like even his death scene I felt was really important. That death shouldn't be hidden. But I kept weird things for myself that later I was like, oh, I guess that was a really important moment. I didn't reveal it. So.
Well, I think we are ready to open up for some Q&A. But before we do, I just want to say again, thank you so much for what you've given all of us in this book. It is just an incredible gift. And it is a love song, as you said. Oh. And thank you for inviting me to talk with you this evening.
Yeah. And before we go to question and answer, I just want to say, like, everybody should read Famished by Rebecca Lester. And also just know, like, she has tons of other research about like nuns and about like pregnancy and Jesus and all kinds of fascinating things. And she was like the cult classic professor at WashU, and we were all very into this incredible course, Gender, Culture, and Madness. So I highly recommend you look up Rebecca's research, because I feel really privileged to be here with you.
Thank you, Marissa. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Amber, I think you're muted.
Thank you for that. And thank you both for a really moving conversation. And I just want to remind our audience that you can submit questions in the comments, and we'll bring those forward. I wanted to start with a question that I had. You all talked early on about the taboo around talking about grief. And I have encountered that. I haven't lost a parent yet, but I have a parent who is just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And I've already noticed that there are so many people out there who have experienced this that aren't, like, I would have never known unless I had offered my telling them my truth first. And so one thing I'm curious in is, what can we do to break down the taboo around talking about grief and illness and death, and keeping in mind that grief can expand beyond those causes. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, first I want to suggest another WashU alum's book. And I don't remember the name. But Stephen Merrill Block was on my freshman dorm in Umrath at Washington University in St. Louis. And he wrote an incredible novel about Alzheimer's throughout history. So I really recommend, he's like the Alzheimer's writer. He knows a lot about Alzheimer's. So I recommend Stephen Merrill Block. But, one of the things that I think is important is boundaries. And the word boundaries didn't mean a lot to me. It still doesn't fully mean that much, but I'm still learning. But there's like two things I think when you're going through hell and you want to have a conversation in this culture. There's two things. One is to remember that everybody is going to surprise you either by being completely inept or by being completely surprisingly incredible. And that you don't know what you're going to get. And that you've got to also remember that the most incredible person that you expect might be having the worst day ever. And that people are often just ill-equipped, and to forgive them. Like they're the people around you who can't help you with what you're going through. It's not because they don't want to. Everybody wants to. It's because they don't know how. And so I think beginning every conversation with that in your mind, like I think it's like, what is it, like the four, what's that like spiritual book, like the 5 questions or whatever, that has like these precepts that you're supposed to follow. And one of them is like to assume that no one's trying to harm you. And I think that's really useful. Like for me, when I was approaching people around the topic of my dad's death, a lot of people would just dipped out. Like really one friend really surprisingly, and I don't know if she knows because I didn't bother dwelling on it. I needed help, so I just kept going. But I always remember that when I was like, hey, my dad's dying. She's like, well, I gotta go take care of my kids later. And people, but you have to remember that people are also going through it and they don't tell us, right? Like a lot of people are just never going to tell you that they're suffering or that they're going through something. And so I think that's the first rule is assume that you'll like expect the unexpected, expect to get loved unexpectedly, and expect to be disappointed, and know that people are people, like just like you. And then the second thing is boundaries. So some people need an invitation. Like when I used to be a sex writer and I wrote for like Playboy and Elle and like the Atlantic, like everybody, I wrote about sex. And I wrote about really complicated things around sex and disability and sex and Kabbalah, all this stuff. And people would just come up to me and talk to me, and men would write me, especially men I know from high school, would write me intense sexual scenarios that they needed help with. And I also was an advice columnist, but they just would assume I was, and I would say something like, oh, like I don't, and they'd say, oh no, you write about sex, you must do it. What I love with sex and with death is to ask permission. I think that just like you wouldn't like lick someone's ear without like having a relationship there first and get permission. I don't know if it's fair to be like, can I talk to you about the grossest part of death? Because some people are actually secretly dealing with death. Some people can't handle it. Some people just, like for me, I can actually handle almost anything if I'm given a warning. Right. And one thing I like have a hard time with is when people expect me to be in a conversation without checking, hey, can I open this gate? Are you ready for this? And oftentimes then if you have permission to say no, it's so much easier. And a lot of people get mad, you just got to deal with that. But if you were to say to me, Amber, hey, Marissa, I wonder if you'd be comfortable talking about like illness and parents. And I might be like, honestly, no, I'm having a terrible day. So no. Or I could say, I would love that. I would love to listen and hear what you're going through. And when someone, it'll take me another 40 years to learn that when people can't be there for me, it's not always about me. And I think I always just assume it's like, even today I was at work and I'm a professor and like someone looked at me like sideways, and for like an hour I was convinced I had done something wrong, and it had nothing to do with me. But I think when it comes to talking about death and illness and breaking taboos, we need to also practice giving people the space to be people and like inviting them into the conversation rather than assuming that they're going to always be ready, because a lot of people just aren't. They just aren't. They don't think about how many of your friends have done therapeutic work or spiritual work. So many haven't. And sometimes they need that to have that conversation. And some people just don't. We're all just weird,
Yeah, thank you. That's true. giving grace to people to be where they are.
It's so hard to do.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a technical question, but we do have a question from someone who's wondering if your book is available in large print.
Oh, unfortunately, I'm not aware that it is, but I wouldn't. That's not my expertise. But I bet I don't know who to ask. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I'm sorry for that.
No, that's all right. We just wanted to throw that out there just in case.
But it is going to be available for audiobook, which might be. I don't know what the reason for the large print is, but audio might be a good solution if it's not available. So I think it'll probably be another couple of weeks, but I'm working on it.
Is it also available on Kindle or ebook? Because that would be another avenue.
Okay, I'll find out. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I do have another question, but Rebecca, if you have one, I don't want to.
Oh, I've taken up enough of airtime with my questions, so please go ahead, Amber. Yeah.
Okay, I was really glad that you included so much about compounded grief. I feel like I know so many people, including myself, who feel like it's just one thing after another, after another, after another. And I think what I have struggled with, and I've seen others struggle with, is how do you make the world stop long enough to even start healing?
Well, that's a great sentence for us to dissect.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make the world stop long enough for us to start healing? And the answer is the world is not ever going to stop. The world never did stop. It's, what we're aware of and what's there and what isn't there. Like, this world is broken. And that's also what's like, you get one life. And so you start now, like right this minute. Like we could all just stop for a second and just be grateful for 1 minute for like, I'm grateful that I'm not outside in the like 90-degree humidity right now. And I'm grateful that there's no lizards in my living room that are definitely outside that door. You make the world stop. You close your eyes, you sit still, you stretch your body, you take a bath. Like, that's how the world stops. The world will never stop spinning. And it probably will at some point. We won't be here for that. But like, we're very much trained to hyper focus on the negative, and it's there, and I'm not denying it. I've always been aware of it since I was born. But I really think the only way to stop the world from spinning and to start healing is to do it. And I think a lot of us don't even start. Like, I know for me, sometimes I'm like, I'm not even going to, like, why do I even bother stretching? Because I'm not going to get fit. And then I just like quit right there. But and I know that step 1 is stretch. And then step 2 is take a walk. And step 3 is like maybe lift a weight if you want to. And step 4 is take a bike ride. And like that, when I recovered my knee, I had to lie on the couch and just lift my leg up and down. And it felt useless, but it wasn't. It was building my strength. And I don't think we'll stop feeling pain. I think that's part of being human. But we get to tend, you get to tend to yourself. That's like it's not taught to us as a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift if, like, Amber, you go home tonight and like decide to make your bed even prettier than yesterday and wake up and like make it and then come home tomorrow night and be like, oh my God, this is my room. Oh, I just honored myself. And it sounds so petty, but it's that little stuff that makes a difference. Like, I know this morning when I left my house, there was one like piece of trash on the table and it was no big deal. And I went to get it because I knew for me, coming home to see it would make me feel less wonderful about coming home. And that's not like, that's nice. And I know that you're like, oh, what does that have to do with healing and grief? And like, but like, where if you look around the room, you're still sitting right here. You get to have that. We get to enjoy that. Like, you get to have that. And that's the beginning, is letting yourself be where you get to be here now, be where you are. But it's a very important thing that I have to practice and I'm not good at, like stopping and noticing. Like, one of the things I like to do if I'm somewhere beautiful is, did I notice the sunset? Did I notice the trees? And it sounds so stupid and cheesy, but oftentimes when I'm traumatized in a state where, because I have had lots of PTSD in my life, and it took a long time to realize that was what was going on, but I'm not great at stabilizing it. And I know when it's gotten out of control, when I don't even notice the beauty around me. So I think what I am like sort of asking people in this book is to start like, especially, so compounded grief, for those that don't know, is when grief sits on grief. It's what we're all kind of going through. And some of us way worse than others. Some people lost people to COVID and then had to deal with racism on top of that. And then had to deal with like just horrific thing, one after the other, with no, like nothing letting up. And then some of us just deal with bad things and bad things and bad things that are just, and the idea in that chapter is also to say, okay, when it feels like it's spinning out of control, you can make a little, like just what I did with this book. Like I love sitting down with a large piece of butcher paper, like the entire, like if you have a dining room table, get paper and cover the whole thing. And I just draw out everything that's in my head. Oh my God, the world is burning there. Like there are people who need like housing because there's a refugee crisis, and there's my left toe doesn't work anymore and my ear hurts. And I look at it all and then I locate me. And like the fact is that we don't even know the half of how many horrible things are happening in the world right now.
Right.
It's horrible. It always has been. But the question is, can you know the half of how good your life is right now as well, and enjoy it while you got it? That's what the hope is. And so I think healing begins with sort of knowing your own story. And that work is really hard. Most people can't do it. It's really painful. No, I can't do it. I mean, there's so much I don't want to know about what's in me. It's very painful. But that work makes, that's like there's something really incredible about the more we know of ourselves. Like we're taught to know others, but when you know you, it's pretty great.
Yeah, I really appreciated that section of the book where I didn't open myself to the page while you were talking, but essentially making yourself your own spouse. Mm-hmm. And that really struck me, because I'm a lot better at doing things for other people than I am for myself.
Yeah.
And to reframe it as looking at myself as someone else, that the way you just framed it clicked for me. And I was all this week driving home, I've been thinking about, okay, so what am I going to do if I were going to do something for my spouse right now? What would be that nice thing? And okay, what am I going to commit to doing for myself when I get home?
That's nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm like looking at you right now and just imagining you going on a hot date with you. I mean, it's something that's, especially for women, it's just so important to be able to get that feeling of beauty and validation without having to have someone else give it to you. Like, I think we could probably, I think hundreds, and I think there are so many people out there who go on a date with someone who is almost dangerous from like an app, someone who might be like just not right for them, just because it feels so good to be seen. Yeah. And I think if we start practicing ourselves, then the dates we choose are really nice, with people that are really nice, instead of sacrificing. But I just had this vision of you like going to like, I'm not trying to remember, like going to like Del Mar, out to like some like jazz lounge and sitting with like red lipstick and like a beautiful dress and going to the bar and not caring who sees you. You're out with yourself. And doesn't mean you kill the vibe of enjoying men or whatever you would like, if it's women or men or like robots. I don't care what we enjoy. It's more just like, it's just that you have the power to feel good without all the things you were told are supposed to make you feel good. And I think it's the same thing with all the rituals and with grieving. Again, it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? We wrap ourselves in love. We wrap ourselves in memory. We do things with our community. We build ourselves into a way that makes it so that being alive is not only bearable, but incredible. Like all the people that I've ever met who have, I have family members whose entire families were literally murdered. Mm-hmm. And it's not like they were like, well, let me hang my head for the rest of time. Like even my grandmother, who was a very depressed person, like she, it's hard to live after your family has been killed. But my grandmother was like, when she laughed, it was like, whoa, like the happiest thing on the planet. We're supposed to try to be happy. Like we are supposed to try very hard to be happy, even when there is horror happening around us.
That's really beautiful. And one of our commenters agrees that they have commented that you are so genuine and they love it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Me on the couch in New Orleans.
It's also really nice to see you in the place that you describe in the book.
Yes.
Thanks.
So it looks like we're coming to a close now. Unless, Rebecca, you have any closing questions or comments? for her.
I would love to know what you're writing next, Marissa, because
Oh gosh.
I have no doubt that there's so much more in you that you have to give.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a few ideas. I'm not sure what yet, but I have some like cute follow-ups to this and then other deeper literary ideas. But one idea was Living Alone, a primer. And it's just like how to do it because it can be really fun if you're not feeling trapped in yourself, you know.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that. Been living alone for a long time as well, so I'll keep my eye out. Thank you both so much for such an important conversation. Like I said, the taboos out there can make difficult times even more isolating. So this is amazing work, and we at Left Bank appreciate it. I personally appreciate it, and for those of you out there, please get on our website, left-bank.com, and you can look up the book and purchase it. We have signed copies right now. And you can also, if you're in the area, come in the store and grab a copy as well. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you,
both.
Left Bank Books in St. Louis.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Bye.
Bye.